Consider this before viewing great books, Kafka's Metamorphosis. Think about works of autobiographical fiction that you have read. As you watch the program, consider the ways in which writers incorporate details of their own lives into their stories. Note how Kafka's own life is reflected in the Metamorphosis. Assignment Discovery now presents great books, Kafka's Metamorphosis.
Family.
Gregor!
They know what you love.
Gregor!
They know how to hate.
Mr. Samsa?
If you don't do as they like, they know what you fear. For author Franz Kafka, home is where the horror is. His groundbreaking novel, Metamorphosis, shattered the facade of a happy family, revealing the monster beneath.
As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from a troubled dream, he found himself changed in his bed into some monstrous kind of vermin.
It's one of the most famous and strange first lines in literary history. Without warning, a mild-mannered salesman is changed into an insect by unknown forces. The sudden transformation, the dry factual tone, announced a literary voice with instant repercussions. Gregor is a young man in his 20s who supports his family as a traveling fabric salesman. Or at least he did. This morning, he's gone through some changes.
He wakes up, he's a roach, he's a bug. And he goes, oh, geez, I'm a bug. I think I'm going to miss my train.
The shock is combined with disbelief and with I think, pure denial of what is going on.
He's thinking, I may be a roach, but I know I can get my clothes on. I know I can make it to the 7 o'clock train, you know? If I can just get out of bed.
Gregor, it's 6:45. Hadn't you a train to catch?
Gregor's family is about to get its first look at their son, the monster. Published in 1915, Franz Kafka's novel Metamorphosis awoke its readers with a thunderflash. It was not just boldly new. It announced that the world had changed and would never be the same. With Metamorphosis and his other novels, Kafka defined the 20th century's fears. For some, his themes hit too close to home. The Soviet Union banned Kafka's books. Nazi Germany burned them. Kafka's work not only survived, but Kafkaesque came to mean falling prey to sinister bureaucracies. Literature and media followed Kafka's lead with incendiary results. Widely banned George Orwell's 1984 shares Kafka's sense of government as a totalitarian big brother. Joseph Heller's controversial Catch-22 portrays the armed forces as a Kafkaesque, idiotic bureaucracy. Even television's The Twilight Zone echoes Kafka's theme that man is but a pawn in a sinister conspiracy. With Metamorphosis, Kafka showed that conspiracy and paranoia begin at home. Metamorphosis takes place in the Samsa family's apartment. Father is a former shop owner, now bankrupt and depressed. When Mother's frail health permits, she tends to the upkeep of the house. Sister Greta is a teenage girl, witty and musical. But father's bankruptcy has forced her to drop out of school.
We have 4 players in this family, and they're all antagonists of each other. They all fight for control.
You have the mother who's dependent on Gregor Samsa, the father who's dependent on Gregor Samsa, Grete, who is this utterly spoiled child, but who's also part of this scheme of things, of the structure where Gregor seems to be carrying the entire weight of family responsibilities and so on.
But today, Gregor won't leave his room.
Open the door.
A family tragedy is brewing. A seemingly united clan will dissolve into a struggle to the death.
The Metamorphosis is certainly autobiographical. He always writes with himself as the central character. We can always look at that central character and say, in some ways, this is Kafka.
Franz Kafka was born in 1883 in Prague, in what is now called the Czech Republic. He called the city a mother with sharp claws. Except for a few years near his death, he would never pull free of those claws, nor would he escape his family's grasp. Kafka's father ran a fine goods store. His mother doted on her husband. Both parents left young Franz and his sisters to themselves.
Kafka's own family, I would perhaps describe with a very modern word, dysfunctional in many ways.
His father was totally the opposite of everything Kafka, the young man, was. He was big, he was powerful, he was successful, he was a businessman. And so young Kafka felt this great inferiority in his relationship with his father all the time.
In the novel, Kafka portrays the transformation as the consequence of a life out of balance. A traveling salesman, Gregor Samsa had to leave for work at 4 in the morning. If he came home at all, he had time for just a few hours to sleep. Gregor had lived this way for 5 years. Now, on the morning of Gregor's transformation, disaster strikes. Gregor's boss, the chief clerk from the office, comes to see what's keeping him.
His worst nightmare has come true. He hasn't shown up for work on time, and they didn't just send a little gopher after him. They sent the second in command. After the CEO, here comes the general manager. Frightening.
Mr. Samsa, what's the matter with you?
Gregor, meanwhile, struggles heroically to maneuver his body to the bedroom door and explain everything.
Mr. Samsa.
But as in a nightmare, movement is unpredictable and excruciatingly slow. At last, Gregor succeeds in opening the door. Gregor begs for understanding, but he can't be understood.
Gregor decides he has to take action. So he is going to go out there and show them all that he can still solve the problem. As soon as the general manager sees this monstrous vermin approaching, he runs away, scared to death, and Gregor has finally achieved something which he could not have dreamt of in his wildest fantasies. He has frightened the boss. This is beautiful for Gregor.
Despite his victory, Gregor is still a bug. Reality has slipped badly off track. Did Kafka write Metamorphosis as a dream? Author Franz Kafka may have made Metamorphosis unfold like a dream, but its themes were anchored in reality, a reality unmistakably Kafka's. By day, he worked as a lawyer and saved the night for excursions into a feverish inner world. Growing up around the turn of the century, Kafka was an outsider from mainstream Prague society. Prague's ruling class was German. Kafka was Jewish in a time of rabid anti-Semitism. To Jews were attributed every horrible quality imaginable, including vampirism.
This was a multi-ethnic society where each ethnicity despised, distrusted, hated, and feared the other. There were still pogroms in Prague. The mob simply wanted to punish the Jews for whatever misfortune had befallen the general population, and so they had the Jews as the scapegoats.
Kafka's status-seeking father forced the family to speak German instead of their native Czech. This protected them from murderous attacks against Jewish people and boycotts of their businesses, but it didn't keep Kafka from absorbing the venomous climate.
I have vigorously absorbed the negative element of the age in which I live, which I have no right ever to fight against, but, as it were, a right to represent.
Alienated from society, even from his own family, Kafka felt a great deal in common with his alter ego Gregor Samsa. Now, in Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, the Samsa family won't face the fact that their fine young son has become a giant bug. They are paralyzed by the monstrous bad luck which has befallen them. Never mind Gregor.
As Gregor changes, they lock him in. They will not talk to him. They only talk among themselves because they think Gregor doesn't understand what they're talking about. They don't imagine that this is still a human. For them, this is now a monster.
Gregor hides in his room where time plays its old tricks and flies.
What you see in the Metamorphosis is a shift in relationship, in power structure. In the first chapter or the first section, Gregor is in control because of his economic situation. In the second chapter, you see the sister coming into power and taking over.
Sister Greta kindly organizes the care and feeding of her insect brother.
Gregor?
She discovers his tastes are changing. He prefers old, moldy food.
Gregor?
And that's not the only change in Gregor.
Gregor?
Grete takes up the care for Gregor because that increases her own power in the family, her responsibilities, her power over her father and mother. She is now important in the family, the way that Gregor was before.
Most of the time, Gregor listens at the door. He yearns to rejoin his family for solace and simple human warmth. But they can't stand the sight of him.
If the family is a model of society and of the world at large, it would give us a very, very pessimistic view of it all. Where is love? Where is humanity? Where is faith and all these other great virtues? None of them is visible in this story.
Yet for Gregor, there's no resentment, certainly no fury. Instead, he feels shame that he can no longer carry the burden of supporting his family.
Gregor?
It was his identity for 5 years. It was all he had.
What metamorphosis means here is the transformation or the alienation of someone, the separation that occurs when someone is forced to do something continuously for a long period of time that is in contradiction to their basic nature.
Gregor Samsa, the hero of Kafka's Metamorphosis, has fallen as the family's breadwinner. The rest of the clan claw their way to the top. Sister Greta has seized power as her monster brother's keeper. It is she who will determine Gregor's fate. Mother has overcome her bad health to find work as a seamstress. She's proven her loyalty to Father and all but forgotten her only son. Father is transformed most of all. He's found a job at a bank. With desperate pride, he wears its uniform day and night.
I think it's interesting to look at the character of the father in the story, partly from an autobiographical point of view. The moment he realizes that he has to come out of retirement and go back to work, he takes his revenge against this insect, his son, and all the hatred that Kafka feels in relation to his father comes out in this very key scene, which is perhaps the most powerful scene in the story of Metamorphosis.
The crisis begins when Greta decides to clear everything out of Gregor's room to give him more space. Mother assists her. Gregor watches helplessly, but can't control himself when they try to take his favorite possession, a portrait of a beautiful woman. All hell breaks loose.
And at this very moment, the father comes back from his job and begins to chase this insect and throws apples, one of which lands in the middle of the insect's back and stays there and festers throughout the rest of the story.
When Gregor is attacked by his father, it's at a moment when the father has already taken over power from the son. And I think he has now lost any illusions that this creature was even part of the family.
Gregor tried to drag himself a little further away, as if a change of position could relieve the shattering agony, but he seemed nailed to the spot and stretched his body helplessly.
If we can imagine an insect running from this huge man who is throwing apples at it, this is a metaphor for the way Kafka saw his relationship to his father in real life.
But in real life, no crisis broke the stalemate between Kafka and his father. Instead, the writer worked out this pain and a legion of others on the empty page. In Kafka's Metamorphosis, over a month has passed since Gregor Samsa's nightmarish transformation. Sister Greta rarely feeds him, and his room is used to store junk. But trapped inside the insect's body, Gregor is still tragically human and more in need of compassion than ever. To make ends meet, the family has taken on 3 identical, detestable boarders. When Gregor emerges, the vile boarders spot him. Outraged, they give notice that they're moving. For the family, it's a devastating economic blow.
There is a metamorphosis that happens also to the sister. She begins to be disgusted by this creature. And the moment Gregor hears his sister say, "We can't go on like this any longer," he organizes his own death.
He thought of his family with tenderness. He realized that he must go, and his opinion was even more firm than that of his sister. He lay in this state of peaceful meditation till the clock struck 3 in the morning. Then, against his will, his head fell forward, and his last feeble breath streamed from his nostrils.
He just decides to die. And he decides to die not because he wants to die or because life is intolerable for him anymore, but because he's a burden on the family. I think that Gregor's relation to his family which is very similar to Kafka's relation to his family, is one of guilt.
Ridden with guilt and self-doubt, Kafka couldn't have imagined that his work would endure, or that his name would enter the language. But before anyone else, the haunted writer warned that in the 20th century there'd be plenty to fear.
Kafka's relevance to the world we live in today is one that has to do with this undefined anguish that we all feel just because of the way the world is constructed now. He probably would have been just 10 times as anguished, because the world is 10 times more anguish-making than it was 100 years ago.
Kafka might protest the ways our humanity is reduced to social security numbers, customer numbers, credit card numbers. All are facets of the bureaucracies that make up the fabric of 21st century life.
Kafka's world is bare of mythologies, bare of hopeful signs. He declares those hallucinations. Face the facts.
Metamorphosis ends with its sole note of hope. With Gregor's death, his family is reborn. Father, mother, and sister Greta take an overdue holiday.
Then they all left the apartment together, a thing they had been unable to do for many months, and boarded a tram which would take them some way into the country.
Kafka's failing health wasn't all in his imagination. Just 2 years after publishing Metamorphosis, the writer coughed blood. For 7 years, he moved from one health spa to another, but he couldn't shake the grip of tuberculosis. In 1924, at the age of 40, he died. The author's stories, suggesting sinister bureaucracies and an approaching age of terror, turned out to be remarkably accurate. Kafka didn't know about the Nazis, or Soviet communism, but he seemed to feel them coming.
Kafka would have said, whatever is imaginable, whatever people can imagine, they will eventually do. That's what he would have said. And he could imagine a lot.
Kafka's 3 sisters were among the 7 million people murdered by Nazi Germany in the Holocaust. Kafka's tuberculosis had spared him a fate that he might have recognized from his dreams.
Keep watching. Discussion topics and activity and resources for great books, Kafka's Metamorphosis, are up next on Assignment Discovery. Now that you've seen great books, Kafka's Metamorphosis, talk about this. The program suggests that Kafka is relevant to modern readers who also experience undefined anguish. Define the term Kafkaesque. What are some aspects of modern society that seem Kafkaesque to you? Now try this. Write a prequel to the Metamorphosis, such as a chapter that reveals Gregor's life in the days before he becomes a giant bug. Show how Gregor's growing alienation leads to his transformation. For videos, CD-ROMs, lesson plans, and teacher resources on this topic and more, log on to discoveryschool.com. To learn more, Assignment Discovery suggests Franz Kafka by Jeremy Adler.